types of commitments we take on at a corporate level for worldwide, which is quite challenging, but to come up with objectives on for the environment that can really be adapted and really rolled out at each level and adapted at each level and discussed and debated and worked on and action plans developed at each level that then coordinates throughout the group. So that's one example of doing it. I think that also where you have, it's a very local activity, but we have a lot of benefit of being a global player. We put in place structures that allow for us to share best practices for sharing advances in technology. We have a research institute that allows us to work on new innovations, to going after and looking at technologies that will help us to better recycle and look to recover waste and use them for secondary raw materials. We have a lot of research going on, and so the benefit of that central research with satellite offices in different countries allows us to roll out things on a larger scale, and to the local entities can benefit from that research as well. And I could go on in terms of technical subjects, and maybe after this, so we can get some more questions, I can think of many other ways in which we try to benefit by being a worldwide player in this sector.
Okay, again.
Hi, Amy Fulton from COSLA, just a convention for Scottish local authorities. You guys, as you don't know. It's a question for Ken, actually. Ken, you said your sort of parting words were don't focus on attitude, don't focus on awareness, focus on behavior. But your examples showed us that the attitudes and behaviors, for example, giving blood, we've decided that's good. We've decided recycling is good. So all of your examples were ones where the attitude was already changed. So I'm just a bit interested in who you think does the attitude stuff and the awareness stuff, and then how sticky are the behaviors afterwards. So there's probably two questions there, but it's more about who should do the attitude things, because it sounds like that work needs to happen as well, and then how sticky will you keep getting these behaviors every time if you just focused on do that behavior?
No, it's a very good question. As I was trying to illustrate with the blood donation example of trying to stop somebody on the street that doesn't have the attitude and awareness, attitude and awareness is very, very important. And in fact, when we do community social marketing strategies for particular behavior, we normally do random sample telephone surveys. And the first questions that we ask are attitude and awareness questions. If people do not have the attitude and the awareness to do something like, for instance, for people, we've done some work on aquatic invasive species. An important thing for people to do is wash the hull of their boats. If they don't know why washing the hull of their boats is important, and if they don't think that it's an important thing to do, those are barriers. I talked about removing barriers. So then part of the response is to actually, part of the community-based social marketing strategy is actually to have the traditional communications to establish the awareness and the attitude to make sure it's there. Because I feel very strongly that you're not going to get behavior change unless those two elements are there, attitude and awareness. However, you can't stop there. It's been proven time and time again that it does not necessarily translate into behavior. So then you have to use these kinds of techniques I talked about in order to focus on the behavior. As far as stickiness goes, if you get enough people performing the behavior, then you have the social norm and you have this peer pressure. And I've done some work on areas where, for instance, on a recycling program where in one part of the municipality, the local authority, you could look down the street on collection day and everybody's recycling. You go to another part of the local authority and in that area nobody's recycling. And it's the social norm that's different. So the behaviors are not adopted. So do we go and knock on every door in that area to get them going? No, we don't have to. We might go to every fifth door. Because if we can just start getting some of them to perform behavior, then we know from experience that you do have the stickiness of those behaviors, and other people start because they start feeling the peer pressure, and it grows very quickly. I don't know if that answers all your questions, but I'm glad to talk to you more about it after.
Okay, let's take two then. Okay, Dan.
Hi, Dan Cook-Viridor. What do panel members think, or is there one example of best practice in your respective areas from around the world that you think we could learn from in the UK?
Yeah, okay, you can. But I'm very well going to just answer, Dan, essentially what I've been talking about is that when you do planning, when you plan a program, whether it's a curbside collection program or whether it's a depot, civic community site, whatever it is, when you put those programs into place, you have to consider human behavior. And quite often it doesn't happen. Most of the work that we get, I haven't measured it exactly, but I'd say about 60% at least of the work that we get now are people that are coming to us after the fact, and they put their programs in place, and they've determined that they're not getting the participation levels that they want, or they're getting contamination levels that they do not want. And so they have problems, and they come to us and they say, can you fix it? Unfortunately, at that stage, sometimes they've introduced systemic barriers into the system that cannot be easily removed, and maybe a lot of money was spent on the systems, a lot invested. So what I would say, what I try and tell people, and this is in another presentation I do, is to incorporate the science of behavioral psychology into the very first elements of planning waste management strategies, because it's such a key to have these people doing the right thing, and secondly, it's a source of free labor, getting them to do the right behavior.
Still, I'll have to give some more thought to the one best practice that I would suggest for the UK. I think that just as I'm reviewing the subjects, what I can say, and it's really pleasing to see in our subsidiary and our operations in the UK, that in terms of sustainable development, in terms of the progress that has been made over the last 6-7 years, it's really quite impressive to see how it's moving towards the recovery, recycling, moving away and reducing organic waste and landfilling. So you can see that there's really very good actions, and actions that we can actually use as best practices in other places, as well as just the programs that are being implemented by our subsidiary in the UK in terms of awareness training, in terms of putting management systems in place. I find that in many cases, the things that we have the Center of Excellence for environment and a number of other technical areas, but the Environment Center of Excellence, I find that a lot of the time we're actually pulling the best practices from our UK operations and sharing with some other countries that are not quite there yet in terms of the environment and even safety. It's not to say that everything's perfect, but I would say that in terms of the way it's moving, what I heard yesterday in the discussions here, it's really, the awareness is there, the programs are there, the policies being put in place, the challenges on getting people to recycle and get the recovery rates that are desired are, I think that they're in place. So I don't have a specific one right now. It might be more of technology ideas that could come in, and I'll find you later in the hallway if I come up with a great one that I can share with you.
And let's just take this lady here. Quick answer, because
Hi there, it's Laura Blair, Aberdeen City Council. I just had a question for Ken. We've run some door knocking campaigns in the past and have received some sort of bump in participation, possibly not to the levels you've experienced there, but what we see is after a short while, those numbers drop off. Is that something that you've experienced in those campaigns? And if so, how often should you run refreshers, and does that actually sort of have less impact over time?
Yeah, that's a real issue that we see in a lot of places. There's a couple things. One is the techniques in, like I do a lot of training of people that are doing the door knocking. There are techniques to try and make those commitments stronger. I can talk to you more about making those commitments stronger. But feedback is really, really important. I don't know if you have them here, Jim, but in Canada we have the United Way campaigns, and they'll set a target, say, of 1 million pounds. And then they have these thermometers about town and say how close they are. That's just a tremendous feedback to people about how well they're doing. But if you haven't made your payment yet, you think, oh my God, everybody else around me